Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming to Meeting the Moment. This was created by Columbia Votes in CAPE. CAPE stands for Civic, Activism, Participation, and Engagement. And this event represents a shift in our work. In the fall, we were all about civic joy, celebrating our civic presence and our civic power. And this semester, we are working on civic action. Like, what do we do in the face of the moment that we're in? So it also represents really the ongoing commitment of Columbia College Chicago to ensuring that we are all informed and we are all empowered to be positive agents of change during challenging times. I'm Sharon Lloyd-Peshkin. I'm a professor in the Department of Communication and Culture. I'm also the faculty fellow for civic engagement, and I'm the founder and leader of Columbia Votes. And we are here on campus where people present can join us afterwards for pizza, but we are also live streaming on YouTube. This is panel number 2, and this one is effective activism, including art activism and how to organize. And our panelists are, and I'm going to start on my right, Asha Imanville, who is the associate curator of the Museum of Contemporary Photography, and Emilio Rodriguez, environmental justice organizer with the People's Lobby. We also have Denise Poloyac, who is a board member of Indivisible Chicago Alliance, and also Josh Fleckner, head of communications for Jewish Voice for Peace Chicago. And this panel will be moderated by Haley Patton, who is one of my voter registration geniuses. There will be time for questions at toward the end of the panel. And now I will hand it over to Haley.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm really excited to get into some great discussions. Hi, I'm Haley. I'm a senior here at Columbia, and I'm a film and television major. All right, so just to get started, I'd like everybody to go around and say a little bit about what you do and your work related to this panel and the topics of effective activism.
Absolutely. My name is Asha Imanville. I'm associate curator at the Museum of Contemporary Photography. I have worked in art and advocacy for the past 20 years, since finishing undergrad in the same position many of you are in New York City and Chicago. I worked initially advocating for women and girls with the V-Day organization to end violence against women and girls worldwide. If you have been to the MOCP, all of our exhibitions are, I would say, justice-oriented. Social justice is such an interesting term for me. I kind of let it go. It's about justice. Aside from the work that I do in art, but very much what informs my practice, I've been involved since 2017 in several international groups that are working to meet the moment, preserve democracy. So folks who have been in the diplomatic space, some folks in government have seen this coming and not wanted it to happen. So I'm also part of Humanity in Action. It's a group that is between the US and the EU. The BMW Foundation Transatlantic Core Group, very much wanting to preserve that alliance as well. I teach at SAIC, a course on global cultural policy. So essentially, if you love comparative literature, we're doing comparative cultural policy. I have been leading this course for the past 4 years. I love it. My tone has changed this year very much. The thing that I like to speak with all students about is that there is legal citizenship, but there is also cultural citizenship. In the last panel, it was so interesting hearing about the ways that people are interacting with policy. Policy is part of that, but also, I know we're being live streamed, I'm just being a little careful of my words. The powers need you to collaborate. They need you to buy into this, and that's where cultural citizenship comes into play. So when we're seeing the president take over the Kennedy Center as opposed to disbanding it, when we see that the NEA is not disbanded, all of a sudden there are new rules for what is American and what should be celebrated. When we think about people who say, don't go into art, there's no power, it's a fluffy career, that has never been, ever been true. In all times of authoritarianism, that is soft power, and sometimes it's not so soft. So again, as we're seeing all these institutions, people are being fired, people are being replaced, it's part of a plan, but also preserving the arts is part of that plan too, unfortunately. So if you are an artist, an arts administrator, you are literally the front lines. You are one of the front lines of what it is to, and again, I know I'm being live streamed right now, but in the resistance, you know how to do that better than anyone. You know what's at stake, you've been trained for this. Anytime anyone has said it's a fluffy career, that has never been true. Power always knows that. You have that power too. Thank you.
Yes, nice to meet everybody. My name is Emilio Rodriguez, and I'm one of the environmental justice organizers at the People's Lobby. I am a lifelong Chicagoan. I lived in Chicago my whole life. I'm from the South Side, from a neighborhood called the East Side. Not too many people know it. It is one of the farthest southeast neighborhoods in the city. Now, growing up in the East Side is known as a sacrifice zone. A sacrifice zone is a term we use in environmental justice to describe a community that has often been put under burden of environmental injustice, whether it was poisoning the land in the 60s and 70s from steel mills, whether it was storing pet coke in the 90s and 2000s, whether it's just the constant diesel fumes. The East Side has long been a place where environmental injustice has occurred, and so that's been my life experience and has been why I began to start organizing. Like I said, I'm an organizer at the People's Lobby, and People's Lobby does several forms of organizing. We do healthcare, we do criminal justice reform, we do Uber and Lyft driver organizing, and like I said, I do environmental justice. Right now, we are working with the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition to try to get the MMA passed. The MMA stands for the Metropolitan Mobility Authority Act. Now, like many of you, I rely on the CTA to get around, and it is not currently serving everyone in a way that actually is equitable and doesn't get people where they need to go in a timely manner, and simply is not working. So we're trying to work to get this legislation passed so that we can rearrange the governance structure to make sure that it actually serves communities. We want to approve funding because there's currently a $1.5 billion budget deficit, and for a system that isn't currently working to serve people, you can imagine how drastic the cuts might be to take away over $1 billion from that. So all that to say is that I am someone who has had experiences with environmental injustice, specifically transit injustice, and it's something I care very deeply about. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Denise Poloyac. I'm one of the leaders of Indivisible Chicago. We are an all-volunteer organization that came into existence in 2017 when Trump won the first time, and we have been resisting him and MAGA right ever since in all kinds of different ways. We believe right now we are at a crisis, that our democracy is at risk, and everything that we care about and value is at risk. And as an all-volunteer organization, what we are really all about is taking people's energy and passion and desire to make a difference and helping them or working with them to figure out how they can lead and be active and how they can do that. And there's so many ways to do that. I think we'll probably talk a little bit more about protest and art and activism here in a second, because that's what the panel's about, but we do it through electoral work. We have people who want to just do research. We have folks that just want to move stuff on social media. So it's all about taking and making and building a community so people know that if you're alone and you're isolated, it's easy to feel hopeless in this moment, but we know when we come together, build community, do things together, and take action, that we can not only kind of defeat that feeling that they want us to have, but we can, build our strength for the crises that are ahead. So we support activism that other organizations do with marshals, sound systems, amplification, sometimes media work. We also organize our own protests, and we'll talk a little bit about some of those in a little bit. But we always say in Indivisible Chicago that every day is a beautiful day for a protest. So we have some beautiful days coming up ahead of us.
Thanks, Denise. My name's Josh. I'm an organizer with Jewish Voice for Peace Chicago. Jewish Voice for Peace is, I think, the largest international Jewish solidarity organization with Palestine. Jewish Voice for Peace Chicago communicates, educates, plans protests. And yeah, we're pushing back against what is essentially in this country a bipartisan mandate for Israel to commit ethnic cleansing against the Palestinian people. And yeah, in my capacity, I'm a communications organizer, so I do a lot of press releases, social media stuff. Last year I was at Northwestern University, so I was involved in organizing some student encampment stuff there. And yeah, I guess my intro is a little briefer, but that's what I'm up to.
Great, thank you guys so much. I'd just like to get into it. So Asha, starting with you, as a curator, how do you see the role of art activism, especially in terms of mobilizing people and shaping public opinion, and how can students engage with art as a tool for activism?
Yeah. Again, as someone who's worked in art in many different fields and has dedicated the past 10 years of exhibition making in museum spaces, I like to think of a quote from Jamaica Kincaid, the writer. She spoke about what it was to write for the New Yorker, and we know what the New Yorker audience was, particularly in the 60s and 70s, the primary reader. And she said, I'm always writing for young Black people. That's not actually who's reading the New Yorker at that time. So when I'm making exhibitions, I am always making exhibitions for young people of all backgrounds. If someone walks into that space and they see some sort of possibility that maybe they didn't know existed before, or maybe they held close to them and didn't know they could voice, that's who I'm making shows for every single time. Part of that is also an act of faith. I think in the ways that we all work, a lot of this is faith, because you do not know what will happen. You know that when you organize, when you world build, right? Whether it is through imagery, whether it's through narrative conversations, or with others that are in the movement on the street, you don't know what happens after that point. So these are all the things I'm thinking about when I'm making exhibitions. For me, I grew up in Sacramento, California, which is the most integrated city in the United States of America. I did not know that when I was growing up. There are definitely problems. Since I have left, I realized we were pretty lucky in a lot of ways. But when I make shows at the MOCP, if you go into any of these exhibitions, it is people of so many different backgrounds from all around the world, and they're in parallel together. I feel like through the media, through many political movements, they would like us to believe that we will always be politically fractured, and that's how it should be. And so when I'm making shows, I want young people to walk in and see that that doesn't have to be true.
Great, and I know at Columbia there's a lot of students who are involved in the arts, whether it's through music or performance or visual arts. How do you feel that they can use their abilities and their creativity as a tool for activism themselves?
Yeah, I would say number one, never silence your voice. Know that people want to hear you, because the same things that you are saying they hold inside themselves and they don't know that it's possible yet to make that a reality. It's always interesting being in spaces with folks from government, people from business, if you're doing collaborative project planning, and the first thing that people from other spaces will say is, what's the budget? And in art, we laugh and say, we never have a budget. Like, we don't have that. But we understand resources so much differently than any other sector I've come across. We also understand visioning differently than anyone. So when you're doing your work, know how powerful you are, and it does not matter if you have money or not. Even if you don't have resources that would seem obvious to other people or not, it does not matter. And someone, a few weeks ago, I was at a seminar and someone said this really beautiful line, and they said, working towards the vision of the beautiful future. And I like that they didn't even just say a beautiful future, they said the beautiful future. And we can only get there if we keep visualizing it for others. Again, the same ways in the last panel talking about media, propaganda, the assault it's cultural. It is through art. This is the way it's happening. And again, you are the resistance. So keep that up and don't stop.
Great. Did anybody else have something they wanted to add to that? No? All right, awesome. So Emilio, something that I hear from other students and just young people in general is how overwhelming it can be to think about the future of climate change and climate issues. How can students combat feelings of hopelessness while staying engaged in the fight for environmental justice?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I think it is important to recognize those feelings of being overwhelmed, and especially recognize that in this current presidency that not only should we feel overwhelmed with climate justice, but it feels overwhelming to just look about anything, whether it's reproductive rights, et cetera, and that's the way that they want you to feel so disorganized. And I think the number one thing to do is to try to control what you can. I think it's so important for people to get involved locally and to control what they can locally. So yes, absolutely, you should be watching the news and understanding what's going on, but you can't drown yourself in that, and you need to focus on the things you can control. So even though it can be like you might feel like you're shutting yourself out from what's going on, I would definitely recommend to reach out to local organizations, whether they're community, neighborhood, like a Sierra Club that exists, the People's Lobby. Reach out to organizations and see what things that you can do in your own community and go from there.
Great, and speaking of local work, Denise, Indivisible has done some really amazing grassroots work, getting people involved at this local level. How do you keep people engaged at the local level when the work can feel slow or outcomes aren't as immediate as somebody might expect?
Yeah, well, I think that sometimes we put too much emphasis on outcomes, especially I've had people come up to me and say, well, you know, I protested this, or I was part of the women marches, and now look where we're at. But I just think that there are so many ways, and they all add up. And I think that is the important part, not to like feel that any one of us has the burden of like having the answers, but that when we take action collectively, we do things together, not only do we make a difference, but we, you find that community. And you know, for some people, you know, Indivisible Chicago is kind of that community, but people have their all other organizations that are very issue specific because of what they care about, or maybe just a group of people they really like to hang out about who share a political passion. And I really think it's building that community. It's like getting together and working with others so that you can build that energy. And that's how we take back the narrative. That's how we demonstrate to everybody that this isn't a time to be despondent, that this isn't a time to give up, but this is a time to like double down, but to do it with joy. And I think that's really what we try to do. We say courage is courageous. I mean, courage is contagious, so that if, you know, we act with courage, we act with visibility, we go out there and share our stories of what's happening with us or to our communities or what we are outraged by, that empowers other people to do the same. And I think that's why protest, why visibility, why creativity in these spaces is so important. You know, I think art and activism is really important because it makes it so much more fun. And I think it's also really important because, you want to get that attention. We compete for attention in this world, and we do it in, regular media, we do it in social media, we do it on, who pays attention when they walk down the street. And so I think by having that creativity and by having the visual, the street theater, music, it's all important part of both building that energy, but also creating that visibility that's so important right now.
Definitely, I definitely agree with that. And then Josh, Jewish Voice for Peace has made some really powerful impacts both around the country, but also in Chicago. You were one of the co-founders, like you mentioned, of a student chapter before graduating and working for the Chicago chapter. How has JVP organized on campuses and off campuses to achieve their objectives, and what can students here at Columbia maybe learn from the experiences of the JVP student chapters?
I think what was beautiful about the JVP student chapter is, you hear the media kind of malign us as like, oh, they're Iranian proxies, or like someone's paying them, or someone's. We were one of the least organized collectives I've ever seen in my life. There was no doubt about it that it was student-led, and I think that's right. The revolution is, there are a lot of important values to bring: love, joy, solidarity, but it's also scientific, and what that means is when you're taking action, you're doing an experiment. You're not knowing if it's going to work out. And you're ready to learn from your failures, right? It's you go into something and you just kind of have a scrappy group of people who all have similar values, and you don't go in thinking you know exactly what's right, or thinking you know the answer, or thinking you know how to solve a problem. And certainly students at Northwestern did not solve a problem. We did not end ethnic cleansing in Palestine, and they're going to keep fighting, but we took some imperfect action, and imperfect action is the best we have, and that's going to help us get towards our goal. Failure is a learning opportunity. Success is great too.
Great, I love that imperfect action because it's, it's still action. That's really great. So now broadening it up to all four of you guys. This is something that I feel like is really common right now, especially as I'm talking about like exhaustion and how a lot of people just kind of feel overwhelmed by what's going on. How do you balance activism with the need for self-care? And how can student activists avoid burnout while still staying committed to their causes?
It's a hard question.
I can take us. You go, Josh. I'm not the best person to ask about this, but you go.
Sure. Well, I think burnout is another learning opportunity, right? Like if you see yourself burning out, then then that means you're not going to be like organizing effectively. Like I have a lot of smarter and more talented people at Jewish Voice for Peace Chicago that I don't feel are the most effective organizers in this time because they're so full of despair. That's not all of us. There are plenty of people who are very motivated and optimistic, but like being smart or being talented or doing the most work, it doesn't really mean much if you're feeling despair or feeling an inability to even take care of yourself in your own personal life. So I don't know. You can think of avoiding burnout as being actually like pro-action. Although again, sometimes you do need to burn yourself out to know that you're really fighting hard, and it's not necessarily a bad thing that you feel burnt out. It's just something to try to find a balance for. Like, I don't know if I want to like demonize burnout or be like it should be avoided at all costs.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think it's super important for people to have strong boundaries and to understand the things that help them rejuvenate themselves, whether it's playing basketball every week, whether it's watching a movie, whether it's just the 15 minutes of going for a quick walk around the block. Holding those boundaries is really important, because if you do burn out and you really say, okay, I've done so many things and now I won't organize, I won't show up for things, that is a loss for the cause. I think it's important to try to, like I said in my other answer, to really be focused and to control the things you can control, because it doesn't serve us if we show up to every single action and to every single protest and to do every single thing, because you can't. The fact of the matter is that people in power have built their power over a long period of time and have gotten a lot of people together, a lot of money together, and it takes forever to do. And so that's why we have to be focused and understand the small victories that like matter, because we're still building our power forward to meet theirs, to change the things that we want to change. We will not be able to save the CTA in one night just because we show up to one protest. It's about constant action and constantly bringing more people in, and to do it gradually, because they've been doing this for so long, and whether we're catching up or building up to them, whatever the case may be, making sure we hold our boundaries and making sure that we're showing up effectively is super, super important, because if we do stop doing that work, then they win.
Yeah, I think part of it is maybe because we're all volunteers, it's like to appreciate anything everybody does and give people grace. It's like nobody can do everything, and we are not I think we're not at all judgmental. It's like, if you can do this and not that, that's great. I'm so thankful that you can do this. And we're not purist in that kind of way, and people can step up and step back, and if somebody needs to go away for 2 weeks, that's great. Have a great time. We'll hold the fort, try to save democracy while you're gone, and have you something to come back to. So I think by extending that grace to everybody, and then making sure you're doing it for yourself, because sometimes it's easier to do it to others than it is to be able to do it for yourself. So it's like, for me, it's like if I'm organizing a protest and I'm energized and excited about it, and I leave that protest energized and excited, then I feel like I have like charged batteries by doing that. But if I'm, if we have 3 protests this weekend and I leave the last protest thinking that I'm drained and tired, that means I need to step back a little bit, and then also create space for other people to step forward, which I think is also really important. I think that's one of the things with us at Indivisible Chicago. It's like, if somebody has an idea, they believe in progressive values, and they want to do something that's nonviolent, come plan it, come figure it out, and we'll support it and figure out ways to drive people to amplify it and do it. So a lot of what we do is like whatever there's energy and excitement to do, and then that becomes contagious too.
I would echo that on the giving yourself grace. I am someone who hits burnout a lot. I do. It could just be personality. I'm also someone, like, I am a doer. Different intersectional identities and just the different challenges that you face every day in doing your work. And I think one of the things I've learned is just to give myself grace, and, like you're saying, things that are energizing. So, sometimes there are things that need to be done. Sometimes it can feel like there is only one of you, and you might be literally supporting 100 people or 1,000 people directly sometimes, that you're actually speaking with, that you're working on behalf with, you're organizing exhibitions for, you're doing tours. You have your main job, but also you're probably doing many side projects. And for myself, a lot of it is learning to say no. Like when I'm at that point, I just say no.
Yeah.
Not impolitely, but I do just say no. And remembering what gives me energy and trying to be with those folks in those spaces as much as possible. So I think it's, depending on your personality type, sometimes it's hard. I don't know that it can always be avoided, but you learn to deal with it.
Awesome, really great. So I know that we're kind of in this new era of activism with the introduction of social media. So how do you feel that we can use social media strategically as opposed to being, a hindrance to communication and information? How have you and your organizations utilized social media as a tool? I know, Josh, you mentioned that you were working with the social media with your group and everything.
Yeah, I can go first. I think social media is one of the, it could be the great equalizer if it wasn't run by like a Meta or a Musk.
Yep.
And I think that in spite of all of social media's flaws, I don't know what's happening in Gaza because Netanyahu ordered a media blackout, and so what people are able to get out through social media, it's primary sources to some of the most horrific war crimes that we've seen, and we can basically only see them because of social media. I know that's a little tangential to the question because you asked about organizing, but like reposting, I know that sounds corny, but like when we have a big platform, like we try to repost things that are factual and currently misrepresented in other more traditional sources of media. We also try to use social media to just mobilize people to come to actions, come to events, get out the word for protests. But we try not to overwhelm because one of social media's biggest deficits is also just that it's too much information at times. And so not overusing it is crucial. And the algorithm is designed so that you open it up and you get sucked in. But as best you can, like being thoughtful and tactical about when you open up social media, what do you hope to get out of it? I think that's so crucial.
Yeah, I think the most important part of utilizing social media is like we're saying, that it's understanding that it's a tool and it can be used to connect a lot of people together. I agree with what he said, where like, it can be difficult because you see all these things and you're like, oh my God, there's so much going on. It can be overwhelming, but understanding and try to utilize it as a tool, because one of the things to, like I said, we're combating burnout, is to understand that we have to do this all together. No one person can change everything, because if they could do that, it would have been done by now. People work in groups, and so utilizing social media to connect, to, like I said, get turnout to an event, get turnout to a meeting, whatever the case may be, making sure that you're utilizing that so that you can effectively use it as a tool to connect people, because I think it's also important to understand that there are barriers to connecting with people now, and it feels more difficult because maybe you're working so long, maybe you got long hours, like whatever the case may be, it's difficult to connect one-on-one with people. Utilizing social media to take that first step to be like, oh my God, thanks for sharing this thing, that's so great. Let's get coffee and connect. I think that's great. I want to have you meet people in my organization. Utilizing it to take those further steps to connect with people, I think is super important.
On the topic of connection, I would agree. I'm also very skeptical about just the ownership of all of this right now. But the people that you're in solidarity with, your peers, your colleagues, folks that you're aligned with in the movement, they are all over the world. We are in such a different time now. It's not only the people in your city, in your neighborhood, like that is so vital, but also like we can see the way this is playing out, it is global. So using these tools and these networks to be in direct conversation and solidarity with people around the world.
I don't think I have a lot to add to what everybody else. It's obviously people follow us on social media that otherwise might not know what we're doing or know about the things that we're posting and reposting. I guess two things. One is that Blue Sky is where we've moved a lot of our social to, because it is at least not Meta, and it's certainly not Twitter, X, and Elon Musk. And then it does make a difference. I think one of the things we try to do is pressure our electeds, and they pay lots of attention there. So that's a place where we can make sure that we take 100 people to their office to make a point to them, and then make sure the whole world knows that we did that and knows that they're being called out, or a demand is being made of them. So I think that there is like some strategic uses like that we also use social media for.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, if I could just add one more thing, and maybe this is a topic for the next panel too, but like social media is also like one of the easiest places for like the FBI to just make a fake account, or someone who works in like counterterrorism or something, right? Like you really have to be careful and cautious about how you use social media, and there are good connections you can form, but take them offline or take them to Signal for some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Great, awesome. And then looking forward, my last question for you guys is, what gives you hope for the future of activism? What changes do you expect to see in the next few years? What do you expect to be changing? I know it's a difficult time to have hope sometimes, but yeah.
I mean, I guess I go back to like failure as a learning opportunity, right? So I don't know if I necessarily think in a framework of hope, or like I don't know if that's actually one of my like guiding values, right? But the things that are important for me, like to stop human rights abuses and to fight for liberation for all, like those things only come about with continued action, even if it's bad action or ineffective action. You're being thoughtful about learning when it doesn't work out. So again, I don't know if I think in the framework of hope, but in terms of maintaining my energy, that's one thing that I like to think about.
Yeah, I want to be careful the way I phrase this, because also, like, I know you asked in the context of hope. In my work and in our organizing, we do issue organizing. So, like I said, my learned experience is that I lived in a neighborhood that had environmental injustices, so I care about that stuff. And it's in my experience that a lot of people get involved after something's happened to them. Once you have a health claim denial, once you realize the CTA doesn't work for you, you're like, this is messed up. I want to change that. With the Trump presidency and with the next 4 years, there's going to be many opportunities where people are going to have they're going to have injustices put on them. And it's really unfortunate, and I'm not hopeful about that, and I hate that. But what I do understand is that because of that, people will realize that this is the wrong path that we're going down, because they were organized into this way. And so when we realize that, and we are prepared for them to be like, hey, I know you voted for this guy, whatever, and you thought that this would help you afford a home, but now you can't even afford eggs. Let's do something about that. Let's organize. Like, the hope is that I think that people will wake up soon and realize that this is not the path we need to be going down, and they will get involved, and they will change things for the better.
I think we're at a moment of crisis in this country, and whether it is a thing that happens or whether it is just the cumulative effects of all the things that are happening, that there could very well be a tipping point. And what will trigger that, I don't know. But I think what gives me hope is that I guess two things. One is maybe the organizing and the things that we're doing now prevent that from happening. But also I think I have hope that when that happens, that people will come out in the numbers and do the things we need to do to really save our country, and indicate that we're not going to accept a tyrant, we're not going to accept a coup, we're not going to allow them to disregard the courts or to further take away our rights or whatever cumulative things it takes to do it. And I think what gives me hope is that we are building now the power and the presence and the connections and things that will allow us to meet that moment whenever and however it comes.
I would say I'll bring the word no again. I still have hope in the word no. Not only saying no, but actioning no in all aspects of your life. Like when you learn how to do that in the interpersonal, in the professional, you learn how to do that in the political space as well. I think about my family, probably most of our families in this room. Your family worked hard to get you here. I'm not giving up on that hard work that they did. I think about collectively folks that are relying on all of us, and at times when I don't feel hope, and I'll be honest, when I go to that place, I remember, no, there are people that are relying on me, that are relying on us, and I'm not gonna let them down. So it's really remembering the struggles of family, all that they have gone through, and historically we know what they've gone through. So I'm not letting anybody down, and also just the hope in what it is to actionably live your life in a way that says no.
Really awesome. Great. Anything else that any of you would like to add before I open it up to the audience for questions? Great. So anybody in the audience, if you have any questions for a specific panelist or just a general question for the panelists, you can just raise your hand. Yes.
I wondered if there are specific artists that you see as being involved in activism who have inspired you. I mean, I think of Banksy on an international level, but I wonder if there's some that you can think of that you have found inspirational or have seen perhaps inspire people to action.
I was able to speak with Tanya Bruguera really briefly for a graduate school project a long time ago. And my colleague, or my classmate was from Italy, and we kept asking Tanya Bruguera about, like, what is the political art? And she was so polite, and she said to us, I'm from Cuba, there's no the political art. All art is political. That's why we're here. So I think there are so many different folks. It would be hard for me to name them, but almost all art is political. Even if it seems decorative, if it doesn't seem that way. When we understand who's supposed to be taking up space and leading narratives of culture, we know who is and who isn't. Yeah.
I have two. One is Michael Rakowitz. He's a sculptor, and he was a professor of mine when I was at Northwestern, and he, I guess, showed me what it means to be a Jew from the diaspora, and just taught me about my own identity, and also he taught me about, like, having solidarity with like Muslim people, Palestinian people, and he uses his art in a way where, right, he'll do like pop-up food carts in New York City in addition to making sculptures, and he'll just do things that kind of bring people together and share culture. In that vein, I think in Chicago there's an organization called Al-Hub, A-L-H-U-B, and it's like a Palestinian youth forum that will host kind of collective painting events, and it's a way to just meet other organizers, other people who are like-minded or not like-minded, and you learn from them. But I think that they do a really good job of being hopeful young people who really bring the community together in the service of both art and politics.
Great.
And I would just say, I don't have a person, but I would say that you go to any protest, or you go and look at social media where protests are happening other places, and there is so much creativity, and there's so much creativity, and there's so much art, and you know, a lot of it gets traction, and a lot of it is inspiring, and so not so much like famous people as much as what everybody does, you know, every day, I think is what kind of inspires me the most.
Fantastic. Any other questions? Yes.
So we kind of live in a reality that is created like with fear. That's the whole power that is trying to create, like with the Trump administration. And I'm teaching a media activism class here, and I know that I'm using a lot of examples, and really, I mean, it's amazing to hear each one of you, the work that you're doing. A lot of the things that I'm hearing from my students in my class is you said about social media, not posting things. So the students are aware of the dangers and the fear that is becoming like, and there's a lot of inspiration to look at, but there's the counter fear to work. And so it's kind of on a personal level, what gets you like in the morning to do the work that you're doing and counters that fear, and what is the message that you can give to our students? I know I'm doing it on a weekly basis, but I'm looking for other resources and other, like, you know, ways that will be maybe out of what I think, to inspire others to join the work that you're doing that is so important, that is so inspiring, but it's very frightening at this moment. It's a tough question.
Yeah. I like to think about Ted Cruz probably far more than I should, but I think, you know, if Ted Cruz can sit in a room and tell everyone what to do and what he believes, I can too. Like literally, like why it should not only be Ted Cruz doing this. So, you know, I think when like fear is a real biological response, like we are wired to feel fear, it's telling us something, but also that's a motivator. You know, fear lets you know who to trust or not to trust. When something is predatory, you know, like believe in that fear, harness that fear, and don't think you have to be quiet or hide. Again, anytime Ted Cruz can talk in public, can organize, you can organize too. And that fear just lets you know where to direct that organizing, I think. Yeah. Listen to it, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think Asha also had a good answer earlier about thinking about the people who got you here. I know for myself, the thing that keeps me motivated is thinking about who am I fighting for, and then also how I'm a part of that. I think something we need to do is to, one, of course, recognize the people in our community and say, hey, you know what, I grew up in a community that doesn't have this or that, that's why I care about it, but to put ourselves in that community. I don't think we do that often enough to realize why I am fighting for the things that I need. Like, yes, I care about my community. Yes, like it's important to get transit access, but I know my lived experience of how difficult it was to get downtown to go to high school. That is also important to why, you know, why I'm continuing to be motivated in a culture of fear. And it's also important to do the work and to try to talk to other people to find out why they're motivated. I think it's really hard to do this alone, and it's really hard when you feel like, oh, I'm just fighting for myself. But when you talk to other people and you talk to them and try to understand why they're motivated, it really, one, reminds you of other motivations you might have forgot, like, oh, actually I do care about that too, I didn't really think of that. But also just to understand where everybody else is coming from.
I think it's just that community doing it together. That makes all the difference in the world. There are many things to be afraid of if you try to do it by yourself, and you won't be effective. But when you do it in community with other people and you stand together, you know, I think that goes a long way for dissipating that. And be smart. I mean, there are things that we can do to be a lot smarter and things we should not be doing. You know, like you said, use Signal and not put it out on broadcast things to the world that you could get in trouble for saying. But use your voice. I mean, we have to use our voice, and it's our collective voice that will be heard. So I think that's the most important thing for me.
Yeah, and I think thinking about the people who came before us and who fought before us, who had much worse stakes than us, like people fighting for a 40-day work week would get killed for striking, 50, 100 years ago. When I was thinking about setting up an encampment, there were a lot of lawyers willing to help, like medics in the community willing to help, helping me understand my comparative risk. Oh, maybe we'll go to jail for putting a tent on a lawn, I guess. That's scary, but we're protesting for something that feels so urgent and so important. And the stakes are actually comparatively safe for us protesting in the US. There is obviously a lot of danger and chaos and fear that Trump can sow, but historically, there have been, protesters have had it much worse.
Yes. If I could ask a question. I come from a generation that was incredibly inspired by art activism and things like the AIDS quilt or Diane's back in the early, mid and late 80s were just an amazing thing for my community. So for those of you that do all of this protest and art activism, could you briefly describe what your dream project would look like?
I like this question. I am making my dream projects, and I hope to continue. At MOCP, we had a show in 2022, Beautiful Diaspora, You Are Not the Lesser Part. 2 titles. You Are Not the Lesser Part referred to what it is to be categorized as a minority, and within that minor means small, and no one is the smaller part of anything. Beautiful Diaspora was bringing together folks from all sorts of diasporas of color. Again, in the media, even in the art world, we're not placed together, right? We're taught that we're not the same, we don't have the same experiences, but a lot of the times we do. A show a year ago, Love Still Not the Lesser, also at the museum, was looking at all bodies that are sites of love, affection, desire, care, and what it would be to walk through the world, acknowledging every single person that you meet in that way, as opposed to seeing someone and assuming I could never love you because of the way that you look. Like, you can meet anyone and you could potentially love them. So I, for as long as I can, hope to continue making exhibitions like this. I love portraiture. I love just seeing people together, and I hope to keep doing that with people from all around the world, as many places, as many backgrounds, identities as we can get in the same room. Yeah.
I guess I'm more of an organizer than an artist. So my dream project is to create a space, whether it is one protest, multiple protests, a series of events where people who are way more creative than I can come and do visual art, do performance art, all with a political bent, so that we add our voices together and to create that space. Whether it's a large protest, then we have hundreds of banners that people have created using all kinds of their artistic talent and do it, or whether we create a space where we can do street theater that highlights the impact of what is being done by the MAGA right and the Trump administration. To create those spaces and have people come to them with their creativity, that would be my project.
Yeah, I'm also not much of an artist. My faces come out a little bit funny, but nonetheless, I think one of the things, like you're talking about, the street theater, that's something I really want to bring to a future protest. I think that, like we're talking about, how do we combat fear? Of course, it's important to have protests and to be focused, but I think it is also important to be trying to bring joy into more of our organizing efforts, and that is one of the ways that I actually really want to try to get going soon. So.
I hadn't really thought about that question, so I appreciate you making me think. I don't have a good answer, but I am thinking about the posters and the banners that people were making at the liberated zone in our encampment. It was just so beautiful to see a fence littered with posters, not littered, but and I think one of the things that fills me with the most righteous anger from that encampment to this day is seeing bulldozers and pickup trucks sent by the Northwestern groundskeepers after we had made this agreement at our encampment, and just seeing them tear everything down and take everything. And I was with one or two other people trying to salvage things and take them home so we could preserve them, but it was 5 a.m. and there were only 3 of us, and it was pretty upsetting to see that art get destroyed.
Yeah.
So not a direct answer to your question, but just something I was thinking
And
about.
also an important thing to keep in mind for all the work that all of you do. Yeah.
Actually, may I toss in one more artist that I just thought about? Lorraine Hansberry, the playwright. Many plays Lorraine has done, particularly I've been obsessed with A Raisin in the Sun for the past 10 years. Lorraine was 28 when it came out on Broadway in 1959. She was a 28-year-old queer black woman from the south side of Chicago. The way that we learn the play in the US, we learn about it as something that's very US-centric, but immediately it was translated into 30 different languages, and it's been shown around the world since 1962. In Eastern Europe, Central Europe, as time passed in Southern Africa, it is all over the country, it's translated. And there's one artist who was a 28-year-old black queer woman from Chicago who made a blueprint for how to have dialogues on justice transnationally. And again, I think that's something to not forget. And that movement continues to this day. Yeah.
Yes.
I was wondering if you could talk about any time that your organizations have worked with another group, either to achieve a common goal or your own group's individual goals, and what that experience was.
Well, I'll go first because I feel like we do a lot of that, not so much on, well, sometimes around issues, very specific issues, sometimes locally, and sometimes, the national issues obviously take a much bigger effort. But what we do try to do all the time is support activism, where we have something that we can offer to someone else, especially grassroots organizers who might not have some of the capacities we have. So one is amplification, making sure more people know about things, but some of it's very logistics. We have a sound system. Well, if you want to do something and you don't have you only have a bullhorn, well, maybe our speaker system will help you. Or, we want to make sure protests are safe, so we have a marshal team and we have organizations. So we did a lot of this, over the years, for example, with a lot of the youth climate groups, because a lot of them were high school kids, and they came and went. We never they would be there one year and next year it'd be a whole different group of leaders. But they would pass on our information from one group of leaders to the next. And then we would get calls and say, hey, we want to do this, or we want to do this art build, or we want to do this protest or this march. Can you help us? So some of it's really kind of taking the things that we can do and making sure they're available to other people. And then there are really issue campaigns around sanctuary cities and things like that we've been involved in and in coalition. And I do think that in Chicago we have a lot of work to do across issues and across to really build bigger movements. And even within issues, people have different viewpoints about how best to achieve goals sometimes, and some of those issues have been argued about and processed for many, many years. But I think that there's a lot we can do to find the commonalities in the things that we believe in and the shared movement that we need to build across issues and do that. And I think how successful we are in doing that in Chicago, I think will be a big part of how we answer the moment that we're in. Because the people who are attacking us are attacking all those issues.
Sorry.
No, you go.
Yeah, I don't want to air out Jewish Voice for Peace Chicago's dirty laundry, but there are certainly people that we collaborate with, and we have ideological differences, and we try to make it work as best we can, and it's not always easy. But I always come back to the fact that Fred Hampton had KKK members in the room with him, sitting down and doing political education, right? You could have the most wildly different assessment of why things are wrong in society, but you could meet people who have some common ground and build solidarity with them. And I mean, that's one of the reasons probably the ruling class thought he was so dangerous. I also have a lot of success stories, Anak Bayan Chicago. I learned about them because they were in solidarity with Palestine, but they're a Filipino organization that tries to get U.S. imperialism out of the Philippines. And I wouldn't have been educated about that issue as much if they had not had so much solidarity with our work and with Palestinian activism. So I think that's one success story and an issue that I'm glad was brought to my attention, because I frankly had not educated myself on that until I was in solidarity with them in our marches.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we recently collapsed. So in my experience working at the People's Lobby and working at an organization, like I said, nobody can do it alone, and no one person can do it alone. And that same thing goes for no one organization can do it alone. So oftentimes you're going to have to, and it's really important to work in coalition with people. Just last week we were in Springfield with the Illinois Revenue Alliance to try to get progressive revenue options instead of regressive ones. And so we showed up with ICER, One Northside, some other groups. And working with other organizations is always great because it lessens the burden. We had a giant spreadsheet of all the legislators we wanted to meet with, and then me just looking at that, I'm like, we can't do that. How can we do that? But then, over the course of a couple hours, we got some people here in the South Side. They have One North Side has some people up there. So it lessens the burden and it really gets the work done, and it makes you realize, I'm not in alone. My org's not in alone. This coalition's not in alone. It lets you see how we get stuff done as a group. So yeah.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more question.
Yeah, I want to push folks in the panel to talk a bit more about the actual uses of social media. It looks that there is a realization that social media is a double-edged sword, or in critical theoretical parlance, that it is dialectical. That on the one hand, for example, it gives us access to information and global reach. We would have never seen, at least as we've seen, the Black Lives Matter movement, the Arab Spring, as movements having global reach without the facilitation of social media. And yet, on the other hand, there are a lot of scholars who argue that actually social media undermines serious activist work, in the sense that it encourages slacktivism, apathy, people thinking that by virtue of commenting or liking something they've done their political work. So do you think, given its dialectical, do you think it has largely enabled your work, or hampered, disabled, and undermined the work that you do, given that it can do both, at least as currently regulated, structured, and organized?
That's a fantastic question. So the way that we use social media most is as a tool to bring people into the organization. We try not to use it as we put some factual information out there, of course, but we don't utilize it as a tool to change people's minds. It's just to bring people in so that we can do that on our own. But you're bringing up a very important point. I mean, I know recently seeing some backlash on TikTok where people were mad at folks who didn't vote this year because of the crisis in Gaza, because of the genocide in Gaza. And it's worrisome because of algorithms and the way that we create our own echo chambers through social media, you have infighting and people who really should be on the same side and not realizing that the problem is bigger and they're looking left to right and looking at these people that really they're on the same side with, and they're not looking up at the people who are actually in the problem, not looking at the systems, you know? So, like I said, we really utilize it as a tool to bring people in, because we think the best way to actually connect with people is in person. But yeah, that's a very good question. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think that in my own personal life, social media has probably made me a worse activist on the whole. Even though I just mentioned all the tools that I think it's helpful for, I think you're totally right that you feel like your work for the day is done if you write an angry comment, or that or you can get that feeling at times. And so I think like putting my phone down has been super helpful, and to build a mass movement sometimes, like online, that's the best way to reach as many people as you can. But there are definitely a lot of drawbacks, because you can get people who engage in performative activism, or who are not willing to do some of the more grassroots work, you know, going out pamphleting, going out talking to legislators, going out planning protests, planning risky action. I do think that thinking that your work is being done by being on social media can be a huge hindrance, and I definitely want to think about that more. Thank you for asking that.
This is maybe not answering the question directly, but I remember the summer of 2020, how there was so much anti-Black violence going on in the city of Chicago in lots of different neighborhoods. And I knew about that because of Instagram stories. People around the city who were saying, like, literally, don't come over here, it's not safe right now. We're holding a march, you know, tomorrow to try to negotiate things, but you're actually not safe. And you know, I think there are people that will be motivated to advocacy and activism in different ways, and there are other people who maybe just won't, right? But they can simply say, like, I value your safety, and I'm letting you know where you're actually not safe right now, and that there are people working on it. So in that way, maybe not from an organizing stance, but just what people can do however they can do it, I found it personally useful. Yeah.
Great. I did see one hand pop up at the same time. Yes.
Yeah, okay, so just to give a little background, I'm currently working on a project in my English class that talks about exploring the role of social media in participatory democracy. And my inquiry basically focuses on how participatory democracy in today's world solely focuses on social media platforms such as, and since you guys had mentioned social media, such as crowdsourcing policy decisions, online petitions, and social media advocacy. So I have a question that I'm asking in my paper, a two-part question, if you don't mind. How do social media platforms like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and certain new decentralized systems aid or obstruct democratic participation? And do these developments promote actual participation, or are they just aids to form a non-genuine involvement, which doesn't really translate into real-life democratic change?
All of the above. I think that all of that can be true. You know, I think one of the things we didn't talk about is I think one of the problems with social media is just the disinformation. And it's not just social media, it's the mainstream media, it's people very intentionally using these tools to spread things that are just absolutely wrong. And, you know, we have a president that will stand in front of people for an hour and a half and spout lie after lie after lie. They're just things that aren't true. And certainly social media has been a real vehicle for that, and that has really been a detriment to everything. You know, it also, you know, does get out the word and does inspire people to take action, and, you know, that's why we all use it. And that is a value. I think expecting it to do more than what it can do and not building the organization, the in-person connection, the element of trust, the actual things that we do out there in the real world, and not taking it that extra step, and then I think we fail. So, I mean, and, you know, there are whole books written about this, I think. You know, looking at, you know, Arab Spring and how, you know, social media allowed things to happen very rapidly that otherwise could not have happened, but without the infrastructure and without the things to build on, then they collapsed equally as quickly. And, yeah, so I think the answer is all the above, and I'd love to read your paper.
Anything else to add before I hand it off to Sharon?
Maybe one last tiny thing, thinking about the question about organizing. One of my favorite things about being a curator is that we work with groups, but also you just find random individuals to have a public conversation with. And it doesn't last forever, right? You maybe are in conversation for a year and a half, 2 years, but the public presentation of that is like 3 to 4 months. So I think there is also power in just literally finding strangers, and somehow, like your intuition, you can tell what they care about, that you have common values, and saying, let's come together just for this purpose, the same way that you would for a march or a protest, for an exhibition for 3 months.
Okay, anything else? Yeah.
Really quickly, if the revolution will not be televised, it certainly won't happen on Instagram. So.
Awesome.
Well, first of all, I want to thank all the panelists. This was just a wonderful panel. And thank all of you for attending. I hope you found this valuable. I hope you found it encouraging in this moment that we're in, as we're trying to figure out not only where we are, but what we can do. Before we break, I want to announce that Columbia Votes has started is sponsoring a book club. It's student-led and student-run. It's called BRANCH, which stands for Bringing Real Action and Nurturing Civic Hope. If that appeals to you, email me at vote@colum.edu, and I will put you in touch with the organizers. And do stay for refreshments after this panel and conversation to talk about what we've heard and what we're thinking and what we've learned. But before we do that, I just wanted to give like a lightning round to this panel and just say, like, look at this group of people that are here. What's one thing they can do? What is one thing they can do?
I'll go first because I'm waiting for the question. Join with us. Come to one of our actions. We have things that are out there. There's a QR code just to tell us about how you want to be active. We need art activism. We need people with creative ideas. And if you've got some that you can immediately apply, we are doing a Stand Up for Science rally tomorrow with a lot of students and folks from UIC. We are doing an action on Saturday to take down Tesla, Trump, and tyranny. We were building cars out of foam board yesterday of Tesla trucks so that we can decorate them with messages about how we need to take down Tesla, Trump, and tyranny, Tesla being the substitute for Musk there. And there's other events. Mark April 15th on your calendar. We want to try to do something really big around tax day. No taxes for tyranny or any of the other terrible things that this administration is trying to do. And I can think of lots of creative things we can do around that. So look for the QR codes and come out and join us. That was more than one thing.
I have business cards that I'll be putting out if you are interested in doing something about environmental justice. If you use the CTA and you want to do something about it, please take a business card, send me an email, and we will do a one-to-one and we can figure some stuff out. We also have an environmental justice task force meeting that we do online next week that I can give you more information if you take a business card. But if you don't want to do that and none of these things apply to you, but at the very least, look up community organization in whatever neighborhood you're from. Just get started in your neighborhoods. You guys have all that information because you live there. So definitely just look up community org in your neighborhood if you want a place to get started.
I would say here on campus, visit the Museum of Contemporary Photography. Visit as many museums as you can. There are political stories in every gallery, on every wall that you will encounter. I would say just in your personal lives, practice saying no. Do not live in the boxes that anyone tells you you're supposed to live in because of whatever, blah, blah, blah. Say no, go to museums.
Yeah, I would say meet people, talk to people, argue with people, and it could be any org. Like, I'm happy to connect with people who are interested in Jewish Voice for Peace or Palestinian solidarity work, but I don't know, like OCAD, ICER, they're doing really important work around immigration right now. So I don't know, there's orgs that do work with environmental justice, right? For anything you could think of, there are a group of people that are interested, and it's not so important if you feel like you belong in this organizational structure, but it is important to meet people who care about the same things you care about so that you can learn what tactics are right for you.
Well, thank you all. The next panel is in half an hour. It's called Staying Safe. And between now and then, we have food and conversation, so stay and join us. Thank you all.
Well done, Haley. Well done.
Thank you. It was fun.